Hello and welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. And welcome to season 2 of Conversations That Matter. This was a conversation series that my mentor coach, Priya Ramesh, who's here with us today, and we started last year. And this was really it was really Priya's idea. And I remember the title for the show, Priya, you came up with that, Conversations That Matter. And we really wanted to create a space for leaders at all levels to come together, learn and grow together, and in the process, demystify corporate speak and demystify um, abstract concepts and really convert them into tangible leadership behavior. And so last year, in season 1, we talked about psychological safety at work, and uh, it evolved. And the beauty of that whole conversation was that it evolved, and here we are doing season 2. So thank you all for joining us live, and also welcome to everyone that will watch the recording later. Please pop in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from, and tell us why this conversation, uh, season 2, being human in a digital world, why does it matter to you? We'd love to hear from you. And we are here to have a very interactive conversation, and we hope that as you stay with us during this course of this conversation, that you are able to examine your own interaction as a human being in a digital world, understand the implications, and really explore what it means to be human in a digital world. So that's what we're here to do. And before I carry on, I just wanted to do a quick round of introductions for anyone that's joining us for the first time. I'm your host, Meenakshi Iyer. I'm the founder and principal of North Star Solutions and Services, which is a boutique future of work oriented coaching, training, and consulting practice. I'm physically located in Virginia in the US on the East Coast. And I've had the privilege of completing my coach training with Priya, and she's been my mentor coach. And this is a relationship that I have absolutely cherished, and I'm so glad that we are able to do this together, Priya.
Thank you, Meenakshi. I'm super excited to be here for so many reasons. One, we had a successful season 1, and the fact that we are back says a lot. Two, two, the topic is very dear, and it really is a conversation that matters. And I know that you and I spoke about it, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And for the third reason, that this is essentially an exploratory session. It's really about you asking yourself some questions about how do you continue to bring forth your humaneness, being human in this world that is, what can I say, has been, there's a deluge of technology at us everywhere we turn, and I'm saying this because I hold technology at one arm distance typically. And Meenakshi knows that, right? I'm not very technology friendly. Perhaps I need some coaching around that, but really speaking, it has entered every phase of our life.
Yes, yes.
And essentially, today's conversation is about looking at it, exploring what it means to be human in a digital world from our personal space
Yeah.
and our personal relationship. Our next session, which will be on the 1st of August, same time on LinkedIn Live, would be on exploring workspaces and social spaces. How can we be human and bring forth our humaneness in those spaces? And of course, the third one would be our ecosystem. So we're really examining it from 3 spaces.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And how did we arrive at this is an interesting story in itself. So we did season 1, which was, we thought, very important because we're just sort of emerging from the pandemic, its effects, and we've gone virtual, work from home, office, and this whole thing about psychological safety was so talked about.
Yeah.
Yet it was somewhere very unclear, and so we thought we'll have a conversation, and it was wonderful to have participants speak about their experiences of psychological safety, given the amount of a virtual world that they currently live in.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, what about this season? What do we do? And as we spoke, we actually thought of another topic. And it was one of those conversations. By the way, Meenakshi and I have a lot of conversations that matter. We bring forth some here, some we just have between ourselves. And this was essentially about, a day when we just asked each other, so how are you feeling? What's happening to you?
Yeah.
And there was this sense of, I don't know, low energy perhaps, a sense of um, not sure. There's not even a name to it.
Yeah.
And we were feeling a sort of in a flux. And
Yeah.
we started examining what that was all about. And that's when we realized that this is a conversation that's important, because it really spoke about how disconnected we were from ourselves, from relationships with ourselves, with workplace, our ecosystem. And that's where this conversation came about. And that's how we are at season 2.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Priya. And as you were narrating that, I actually went back to that day that when we
Yeah,
actually had that conversation. Then
right.
there was a lot that we unpacked just in that in the brief time that we talked, and we felt that this is something we need to take to the world, and here we are. Yeah, and I also uh, the three levels that you talked about, and I think starting with self is also something that's personally important to me, because that is my leadership philosophy and also coaching philosophy, that before we try to unpack what's happening around us, let's try to kind of figure out what's happening inside of us. And so starting with self and then expanding that circle to look at what's happening in other spaces, the interpersonal, and then the larger ecosystem. I really loved how organically this framework emerged in our conversations, and really, really looking forward to exploring each of these spaces with you. And I want to call out, there's a couple of people that have chimed in the chat. From South Africa. Good afternoon. And then we have Mira. Thank you for joining us, and keep your comments and thoughts coming through. And if you have any questions as we go through our conversation, so we're looking to be here together for about 60 to 75 minutes, and then, as Priya said, we'll be back again next week. So it's a three-part conversation series, and we'll be back again next Tuesday and the Tuesday after that. So, so Priya, what are your thoughts at the moment as you think about technology and our relationship with technology as individuals?
Like I said, I think there has been a sort of a deluge of technology, and it's very strange that how it sort of, in very subconscious way, starts encroaching your life to such an extent that personally, I started feeling that every gap I had in my day, I used to fill it with gadgets. And it's
Yes.
automatic. Okay, you finished an assignment or you finished some work, your hand goes out. And does it stop with just mails? No, not really. It goes into looking at some of the other social media handles, and then it takes you. And I find myself, I really found myself very, very disturbed at some point, saying, I don't even have time to process the emotions that come with that happen or that I go through the day, because there's just so much of information deluge. And there was a sense of you know desensitization that I was experiencing, Meenakshi. There's something happening in one part of the world, there's something else happening in the other part of the world, and it was all just flowing in, and you're just moving from news to news to news, simply not processing this. And that for me is was scary actually. What was it like for you, Meenakshi?
A lot of what you said, I can relate to that. So I consider myself someone who's very intentional with how I use social media. There's just a couple of channels that I'm on. LinkedIn is my primary channel, and because I run my own practice, run my own business, I do feel the need to engage more actively on social media platforms. But um, I've always prioritized my own, I don't know, sanity, I guess, or mental health. Uh, but also because of my background in technology, software development, and product development, I think I'm fairly familiar with sort of the underbelly or the dark side of all of this. And so that kind of prevents me from, I think it helps me in my self-preservation, I would say. But I because I operate, all my work is virtual, and I'm, my my coaching conversations are virtual and things like that. I There is a need for me to be in the virtual space and use the internet as much as I do. But the news, like you said, and I think for me particularly, I do want to say this, that I'm at a point of compassion fatigue now. I've reached a point where, exactly like you said, I mean, so for example, if you were to look at just the last 2 weeks, we have so many weather related human made disasters happening around the world. So here in the US where I live in a bubble at the moment, and I'm so grateful for that. I live in Virginia, and the area where I live, I think the worst we've experienced is a snowstorm or a thunderstorm, and I am so grateful, knock on wood, that I haven't experienced any damage myself, like to physical or otherwise, like to my house or to where we live and things like that. But I know I'm amongst the few fortunate ones, right? So when I look around, there's forest fires up in the north in Canada. There's flooding happening in the same time in a different part of the country. There's flooding happening here. There's heat wave. People are dying. So and so much happening in India. And I still have one leg in India with all the connections I have, and my mom lives there. So it's so hard to um, take care of myself and my own mental health when I'm exposed to all this that's happening, over which I have no control either, right? So it's not like, so even let's say my mom, she lives in Kerala, and the monsoons are challenging every year, and they're becoming more and more challenging with every passing year. And so even if I were in India, I wouldn't be able to even reach her, like physically reach her, because of how challenging travel is going to be, or travel becomes during these times. So there's that aspect of it. There's so much going on. I get to know about this, but then what do I do with it? And then that whole struggle of feeling helpless and not being able to influence the situation in any which way. And this is true of a lot of things, right? There's a lot of social injustice happening. There's a lot of uh, the number of people that are vulnerable and that are exposed to all kinds of human-made injustices. It's just atrocious. And as a very engaged, involved, evolved citizen, I feel very strongly about these things. But what am I able to do about this? So that sense of helplessness, combined with wanting to being aware of the importance of retaining my own sanity so that I can be of use to people around me. You can't pour from an empty cup, kind of thing. So I struggle with that a lot. So I feel like I have access to news and information, whether or not I want it, and whether or not I'm prepared to process it.
And the interesting part of this news is that earlier we used to have a physical newspaper.
Yes.
right? So there was a very intentional act of picking up that newspaper and reading.
Yep.
Whereas, even without asking, there's a deluge of news items that come onto your phone.
Yes.
And, I was just thinking, we were watching the Wimbledon the other day, and there's just so much news about the players,
Yes.
what they said, they might not have said, what they felt, what they might not have felt. Is that real? Is that for a fact? We don't know. So
Yeah.
I found myself moving away from the game. This is about a masterful game that people are playing out there, and I really found for a second my attention was moving away from the game to what was going on between these people and what was true, what was not true. you
Yes.
know I don't even know which is real news and which is a fact and which is fake. Having said that, Meenakshi, I think technology that way, being in a digital world, has given me access to things that I never thought. For example, LinkedIn Live. I mean,
Mm.
it's amazing, right? We are able to have a
Yes.
conversation right here, and anyone can join us
Yeah.
and have a conversation, and you need not even have known this person before,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is amazing. So the point really is that as we explore this, what stands out for me, Meenakshi, is that when you're really not saying that one is good versus the other,
Yeah.
it is just finding that little space in this digital world where we can continue to be human.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And you bring up a good point. Uh, just the fact how we are able to connect with people from anywhere in the world right now, right? And we are on three different platforms at the moment. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and people can watch us or watch us now, watch us later, and it's available and it's accessible.
Right.
So if you think about, and I know this was one of the things we had talked about earlier as well, is how does technology, how does it encroach? You said that earlier as well, right? How does it encroach? So there were three things that came to mind as you were sharing that. One is, and the Wimbledon example that you shared, right? Like you're, as a human being, you're also, because so much is coming at you, you're also
Yep.
like focused on the drama around the players as opposed to
Absolutely.
just the sport, right?
Drama it is.
Isn't it? And so the way technology is designed, so the interesting thing is that all technology has been designed by us human beings.
Absolutely.
Right? And so what are we creating? How much attention are we paying to this? And this is for another time. I'm probably the third episode when we talk about ecosystems, something that as someone who's part of the tech world and who pays attention to what goes on, and when I look around at all the big tech companies, there's hardly anybody that looks like me who's engaged in creation. So I'm wondering, am I just a consumer? Am I just a bystanding consumer, or am I? How do I have the opportunity to be engaged in creating these technologies? Right. So that's a. I want to put a pin in it, but that brings us to this point of how most of these platforms that we engage with on a regular basis, be it any of your social media channels, or be it even your news channel, a news app. Anytime you have an app, you access it through a smart device,
Right.
or be it your streaming services. What does it do? The first thing it does is, hey, because you watch this, here's some more of the same, right? So there are all these prompts that come at you, and all this is doing is it's studying what you are doing right now, and it automatically, the base assumption is that you want to do more of that. You had chocolate ice cream today. Oh, well, Amazon is going to remind you that, hey, you didn't buy chocolate ice cream today. But that was yesterday. But the base assumption is that you want to do more of the same. And so so the one is those whole prompts and algorithms, and these send these nudges to you. Right? Now, I think that brings us to a point where we have to be more intentional and more responsible about how we respond to these nudges
Absolutely.
and prompts. Do we just go on autopilot, and do
Right.
more of the same, because then that, so that I feel that's that. And as I said this, I what came up for me is that that if we don't take that pause to choose how we want to, whether we want to react or respond, we are giving into technology, and then we are losing our sense of agency, which is what defines us as human beings.
Absolutely.
Choice and will, right?
Choice in that.
We are giving
Yes.
that up by putting ourselves in autopilot.
This reminds me of how the whole topic came up, and we had one of those conversations, Meenakshi, sometime. And I'm curious to hear from the audience how technology has impacted you. The fact that when I actually there was so much going on for me the day I was talking to you,
Yeah.
and just the act of connecting with you and having that conversation, I think did a lot for me because it helped me process what was going on for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's important for me to stay connected to what I'm feeling and
Hmm.
process what I'm going through, to be this intentional person, to exercise my choice. Else I'm functioning from a default way.
Correct. Correct.
And these are things that make us human,
Hmm.
right? Our ability, like you said, to make a choice. And what more, right?
Hmm.
What does being human really mean? I love that question that you put there. And asking you that question, Meenakshi, when you say, being human,
Hmm.
and our topic today is really being human in a digital world, which means to say that we're not doing away with it. I mean, that's our
Correct.
reality,
Yes.
and
Yes.
there's more coming, and it's fantastic. But how do we continue to stay human
Hmm.
in this raging, in this deluge, in this, and not, because it comes in very insidiously and it encroaches upon ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
So what does it really mean for you, Meenakshi? And if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to chip in, please do put it on the chat.
Yeah.
What does it
Yeah.
mean for you to be human?
Uh, First word that came up for me when you asked me that just now is freedom. And meaning that freedom as in related to choice, right? That I'm not just on autopilot. I'm not just doing this because the Alexa app reminded me to do something, or because Netflix said I must watch this because I watched something similar, that I am actually going to go watch it. Right. So, am I engaging in that moment? Am I taking that pause in that moment to say, I really want to do this, or am I making a different decision? The ability to retain that's one that's important in the context of a digital world. And the other thing that comes up for me, and this is also something we talked about as we were coming up with this conversation, planning this conversation, is I find that especially in a social media heavy world, most of us tend to, a lot of what we see online is curated, right? We want to show our best selves, be it in terms of, hey, this is the holiday I went on, and posting pictures on Facebook, to saying, I wrote, this is the book, my book is coming out, and all of that publicity on LinkedIn, whatever it may be. Very rarely do we make it a point to talk about the challenges we faced on that journey, the misses that we had, the mistakes, the missteps, times when we were not our best selves, right? We don't show that. We hardly ever show that. And I find that because our lives, what we portray online is so curated, I feel like it chips away at our authenticity. So being authentic And again, I know being authentic, that term itself is very loaded. It doesn't. So I do want to clarify that, right? So being authentic to me is that I show up the way I am, while taking responsibility for the impact I create on others. A lot of times people think just showing up, oh, this is who I am, take it or leave it. I think it's rather irresponsible. So if I'm able to retain my authenticity, where if tomorrow any one of the people who are watching us live or will watch the recording, if they were to meet me in person, uh, there should not be any jarring. It should be the same person that they experience me through this box and in person. So I would say freedom, authenticity, and also thinking about the empathy aspect of it as well. So I find that it's so easy to make a comment or pick on someone online because you're hiding behind a screen. And, we have all these devices with us that make that access so easy, right? So I'm reading a post on LinkedIn and I am triggered, I'm feeling triggered, and I want to express that. Going back to Viktor Frankl's quote, do we take the pause? And more often than not we don't, and then we just say something. And I'm finding that that behavior, and I know we'll talk more about that, that behavior is actually trickling into our in-person interactions, where we've becoming less and less tolerant, and more triggered, and okay to speak our mind with scant regard for how it lands with the other person, right? So being human in a digital world, it's about freedom, authenticity, empathy, and responsibility, feeling of that sense of responsibility towards others, the impact that we leave. That's what's coming up for me. How about you?
So the thread that's running for me, Meenakshi, from all that you've said, is see, we can't exercise choice, we can't be authentic if we are not really connected with ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
And so, therefore, my relationship with myself becomes very critical, is important.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
we are very outward facing. And that's what this how it has encroached on our personal space and our relationship with ourselves, is that we've become so outward facing that it has redefined our relationship with myself. I can say that for myself, right? And so it's a very conscious effort to really say, what do I actually feel? Who's my real authentic self here? What am I standing up for? What am I not standing up for? And if I ask myself those questions, one, I need the time and the mind space to ask that question.
Yep.
Two, I must listen to the answer. And that's the only way I can connect with myself. And I think it's about creating those spaces on a day to day basis, maybe, where I have this time for myself to be with myself and be true to myself, keep that connection with myself. You did speak about empathy, but I'm also saying, how about me to myself?
Yes. Yes. True. True.
And we've heard when we say empathy, we there are a lot of questions about how can AI take on more human like activities, all of that. That I still feel that the our ability to connect with ourselves cannot be replaced by anything.
Yes. Yes.
And that's a very important connection in my view. If we lose that, if we are desensitized to ourselves, we can really not truly function in adaptive ways in our worlds.
I'm just making a note of that. Our ability to connect with ourselves cannot be replaced by anyone else or any tech
Absolutely.
for that matter.
Yes, yes.
That's insightful, Priya. And I think that the more we um give into technology, and I think it also goes back to us not paying enough attention or not being what's the word I'm looking for, not being conscious or cognizant of the fact that at the end of the day, all the technology that's available to us is owned by for-profit corporations. And anytime anything like LinkedIn is, you have a free option. Like you don't have to. There is a paid membership option, but there's also a free option. Most of these platforms, it's free to join, right? And then in the tech world, they say if anything is free, then you are the product, because all the data that is gleaned off of you is used to do more of it, right? So being aware of what those limits are for yourself, where you are able to, like you said, stay connected with yourself, be true to who you are, uh, act in alignment with your values, with your core values, and what's important to you, knowing what you stand for and what your principles are, really, right?
Absolutely.
Uh, Becoming, and I totally agree with you that that's like an intentional thing that we have to do,
Yeah, yeah,
and then really create time and space for that.
yeah, absolutely. So we spoke about a lot of qualities that, what shall I say, characteristics that we say when we say human, right? We talked about connectedness.
Yeah.
We spoke about freedom, choice, empathy, authenticity. One other thing that comes to mind is it is in these spaces that where we are connected most to ourselves. Um, there's also a space for creativity,
Mm.
and that's a very, very human quality, I would say. How do you see creativity fit into this, Meenakshi?
I think, to me, it's about originality to some extent. So the more um, the more time I spend looking at what others are doing, it's a sort of a passive input to my system. But if I don't pause to examine, like they say you have to question your own thoughts.
Yeah.
So if and I believe it to be true because I can't. Every thought that comes to my own mind cannot be true, cannot be a fact. I have to pause and question it. So if that's the case, then I have to really monitor what I'm ingesting, because then I'm just going to, if I don't pay attention, there's a good chance that I'm going to create more of what's already there, a version of that, right? So
Yeah.
then it's more, um, you're emulating rather than being original with your creativity. That's what came up for me.
As you speak, Meenakshi, I just wanted to, an observation that I've made, right? See, when you go out on a holiday, maybe, or not even a holiday, even when you just step out, we keep taking selfies, right? We take pictures and it's out there for consumption of everybody else.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
A picture will never capture the experience that you felt at that time,
absolutely.
right? So you can make that picture look most beautiful, but what you've lost there is that experience of that moment.
Yes,
And I
yes,
don't think anything can take away from that. And that's being human, right?
yeah,
Experiencing it in full. When I say experiencing thought, feeling, body, sensations, everything in that moment. And we are just so busy spewing stuff for somebody else's consumption too,
that's true.
while we are consuming mindlessly.
Yeah,
We are
yeah.
also offering more. And I want us, when we say being human in this digital world, what I really want us to be doing more of is finding that balance.
Hmm. Hmm.
And to say, this is an experience, I just want to experience it.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's really a beautiful what shall I say? I know, Meenakshi, you've sent us a lot of pictures of your sunrise, right? It's fantastic. And thank God we are able to see what sunrise is like in Virginia, for example. But your experience of it without the lens
Yeah.
and just your eyes at that moment is something else, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I I still remember that one picture. It was the holidays here, like the month of December, and it had snowed the previous night. And the next morning, and it usually happens, right? The next day is like there's bright sunshine, and everything is just um, illuminated because the sun reflecting off of the snow. It's one of the most beautiful sights, and I remember that and I remember just standing there mesmerized, and then I took a picture.
Absolutely.
You know, it was all like it was golden, and if you look at the picture, you would think that it was touched, like it was photoshopped. It was not. It was that absolute. I remember, as you said that, I went back to that memory of standing there in front of the window, just standing there taking it all in total disbelief and awe of how this could happen. And it was it was a natural phenomenon, right? So that picture is all the tops of the trees covered with snow and the sun hitting them, and everything is golden, almost biblical. So as you said that, and that's so true. So this experience that I carry with me is cannot be captured anywhere,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And and the other aspect of this is the more we curate our lives for curate our lives, and you're right, it's more often than not for the outside world, we lose, or our ability to stay in the moment and enjoy it diminishes because we're so focused on capturing that moment for
Yeah.
somebody else. Right?
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. um yeah.
This is something.
You're talking about the sunrise. I'm still in that. I'm feeling so joyous just thinking about that day, and it's been like 3.5, 4 years ago now. Thank you for that.
And that's the beauty of it, of being connected to self, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
That in a way you're processing this, else it's just a picture that you'd flick through.
Yes, yes,
Amazing.
yes, absolutely. And I'm seeing a couple of comments here. So Mira says digital platforms offer unlimited opportunities to get connected with whatever, whomever is close to you. At the same time,
Yes.
one misses the real warmth of the human touch. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. There's more. Yes, digital platforms offer more than one needs, and the acts the tool to as a tool to connect to whatever, whichever that we would want to know. But sadly, the human touch is lost forever. Mm.
And I think that's where this conversation matters. When we are saying we don't need to let it be lost forever.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we still connect to ourselves? And because we're speaking about personal space, I'm focusing on that aspect, saying, can we still continue to find those moments? You called it a pause, it could be silence, it could be reflections, whatever. That time where you're connected to, because human beings are wired for joy.
Mm.
Yeah, we are wired for goodness.
Mm.
All of that gets cluttered if you're not mindful.
Yes, yes. Um, and as you said that, um, I realized that I have personally gained so much from being part of a digital world as an individual. Yeah, and so in my career, I've worked as part of remote teams, virtual teams for more than half of my career. So I'm very fluent in this space, and it comes naturally to me. And so building those connections, like you, for example, we have yet to meet in person. It's been like, I don't know, 3.5 years now.
Right.
So, but I I think that for me, it's a I feel very fortunate that I've been able to build these relationships in a completely digital world.
Mm,
And what I have gained is, and as folks in the comments have called out as well, is the access to learning and being able to connect with anyone, any kind of content, and really learn on my own. So being self-directed in my learning and being able to set those goals for myself and figure out different ways of accomplishing those, that's to me that's a gift of the digital world. And as I was thinking about this conversation earlier today, my morning, and something I wanted to share in this forum is that what I'm taking from the digital world to my physical world, I think, is a little bit more courage in reaching out to people, because I do it more easily in the virtual world. Like, let's say on LinkedIn, and if let's say I've been following somebody for a while and really feel inspired by their content, and I've learned from their work, I don't hesitate to reach out to them and actually connect with them. And I'm finding that I'm bringing that courage to my physical spaces
wow.
where reaching out to people or asking those questions, I do it more easily than I would have a few years ago. And that's an observation of myself that I had earlier this morning when I was thinking about our conversation today.
So this brings up a question for me, Meenakshi.
Mm.
So are we saying that because it's an exploratory conversation, right? So my mind's running this way, saying, are we really looking at physical world, physical presence, human touch as the only way to stay connected, or to bring forth our humanness, if you may say so?
I don't think so. And um, and I think my lived experience and my personal life has shaped that. So I've had pen friends back in the day,
Right.
and some of them, like one of them, as adults as well, we've kind of kept in touch and reconnected. And so I've moved around so much physically that it's always been it's not been easy for me to stay in touch and meet people in person as much as I would have liked to. So for me, building connections, um, so physical boundaries don't mean anything to me personally, because I think it's the intention, and so the other aspects of what it means to be human that we talked about. If for me, as long as the integrity comes from uh, my say do gap being as close to zero as possible. So if I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. Right. So how I respect my commitments that I make, showing up as myself and being attentive and being committed. I think there are so many ways in which you can show, and I think this is something, and this was also something I wanted to bring up, is in organizations as leaders, a lot of us struggle with how do you lead people you can't see on a daily basis. And I think it goes back to what you said about how do we connect with ourselves first, because how we lead ourselves is reflected in how we lead others. And um, so to me, having being in the same physical space or being able to meet in person, to me, is not a prerequisite for building a human relationship.
Right. Thanks for sharing, Meenakshi, because I think that's a distinction that's important to make. That we can stay connected even through the digital world, even virtually, as deeply as we would in a physical
Absolutely,
world.
absolutely.
It's just being mindful about, intentional, like you said, being deliberate, and
Yes.
bringing forth our true self, right?
Yeah.
And I was just reading this book called Silence. I, it's my go-to topic, right? Silence and pause, because I find there's just so much that can happen in that space. And I was asking myself, when am I actually silent in a day?
Mm,
I'm very few moments in a day when I'm actually silent and I'm hearing myself.
mm,
There's just, I mean, like I said, you fill every gap with a gadget.
yes.
It's just flooding.
Yeah.
It's just flooding. And just reading this book, I told myself, I'll read just one page. I'm
Mm,
in no dashing hurry to meet any target about this book, or my my uh, there's no appraisal around this. There's nothing. There's no goal, right? It's just the act of focusing on that.
yeah.
Because for me, physically holding a book and reading is in some way, all my tactile senses
Yes.
are at play.
Yeah.
It's not just my cognitive self, right? And and it was very interesting. What happened was, I found a sense of groundedness,
Mm,
a sense of comfort with who I am.
mm,
This book is written by a monk. I struggle to pronounce his name, but I think it was very timely for me to read this book to say that all those things that define me as a human being, I still have it in me.
mm,
I can still bring forth that in every interaction,
mm,
but it always has to start with me.
mm, mm.
So, as
Yeah.
an act of being human, the first act of being human in a digital world for me is to find those moments of silence
Mm,
in a day.
mm, mm,
What would
mm.
that look like for you, Meenakshi? Being, what is that being human in a digital world? What would that look like for you?
Mm. Silence is a big part of that for me as well. And I, because as you were sharing your experience, I was thinking about it. So my morning routine, for example, is a lot of just being, right? Um, yes, I do check my phone and all of that, but um, the thing is, I'm conscious that I'm doing it.
Yes.
So I got, because I used to, I for a while I was in, I shouldn't do this, right? So I was putting these sort of rules on myself, and then it's like, okay. So these days, um, so I have certain basic rules. Like I turn off the internet on my phone when I go to bed. I use my phone as my alarm. Blah blah blah. When I go out with friends or when I'm socializing, I either don't take my phone with me, or I put it away on silent, and I'm not checking it, and I don't keep the phone with me physically. Um, and so that really allows me to just be in the moment with what I'm doing. So I think, you know what, that brings up that for me. So for me, being human in a digital world is monotasking. I'm just doing that one thing. So if I
Yeah.
committed to doing something or being somewhere, I'm just doing that one thing. So I think that's my biggest piece around being human in a digital world. And then also being, you know, this brings up another point. Like when we go out to eat, when my husband and I go out to eat, um, or we're with friends, I notice that I see several tables, at least 8 out of 10, where there's five, six, four people or two people, and nobody's talking to each other. Everybody is in their devices, right? To me, that's the saddest thing I can see in a social place like a restaurant. And I remember the other day, um, I we were out and I saw this two people sitting at the table next to us. I don't know if they were a couple or not, but it was a man and a woman, and the man had his phone out and he was clearly engrossed in that, and the woman was asking him something, and I caught that moment when that face, that expression of disappointment on her face, and she had no choice but to pull out her own phone. That was a response, right?
Right.
Because there was an attempt to engage in conversation, and that was not welcomed by the other party. So, like you said, fill every gap with a gadget. So that's what this person did as well. And I just caught that, literally that microsecond there, and it made me very sad. So I think that, so the important aspect of being human for me is monotasking, like we were designed to be biologically. We are designed to do just one thing at a time.
Absolutely.
So being true to that natural aspect of ourselves, I think, is important to me.
And these gaps that we fill with gadgets, right? Perhaps when you look at children, are we hearing more messages where saying, I'm bored? And it's almost like saying, it's not okay to be bored,
Yes.
right? For me, I think you have nothing else to do, you'll find to ways to engage yourself
Yes.
other than the gadgets.
Yep.
So essentially, building this relationship with oneself, keeping the sanctity of the personal space and the personal relationship to oneself is, I think it's a very conscious effort.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you've said that, intentional. And I think it's really important for us to be mindful about what we consume.
Yes. Yes.
And it's really important that uh, we spend those moments processing what's coming our way, because it'll continue to come.
Yes. Yes. That just struck me, Priya. Uh, that it's like the food we eat, and we what we put inside of our bodies is important, and
Yes,
right. And similarly, the media and the whatever digital that we consume is part of that, and it goes, and that's what affects or influences our mental well-being, I think.
absolutely.
And something else you said, right, when you said the one is the need for silence, importance of silence, and also the need for processing. And then I was going with the food analogy, is that like there are eight, I don't know, 16 to 18 waking hours or whatever, 12 waking hours. We don't keep eating every single hour.
Mm,
We eat and there's a pause.
yeah,
That's what came up for me as you said that.
yeah, yeah. And that's where the role of emotions come in, right?
Yes.
Where we are saying we are a whole entity. It's not just our cognitive side, which is on overdrive, right? We need to be mindful that we bring in all of ourselves. So we are so busy showing up for others. How are we showing up for ourselves?
Yep.
And we don't show up just from, from a cognitive space. If we have to show up for ourselves, our whole self, it's all about those emotions, those feelings, those thoughts, the actions, the behaviors, all of it.
That was pure gold. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a thought-provoking question, right? Um, and I saw a comment here as well. And that was beautiful. Silence is needed to understand the whispers of wisdom from within and outside.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
And the word whisper, is amazing, because that's where like intuition, wisdom, they show up as whispers. If we can just pause to hear it, I mean, it's amazing. I loved it.
Yes, yes. It's such a visual, visceral thing, right?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I just want to do a quick time check with everyone.
Sure.
So we have another 15, 20 minutes that we're going to be here together. Love to hear from you. So if you've just joined us, welcome. Or if you're catching the recording just now, welcome. This is season 2 of Conversations That Matter, and we're talking about being digital in a human, being human in a digital world. Talking so much about the digital world. It's about being, yeah, I flipped that. Um, and the what we are doing here, what Priya and I are doing here, is really exploring what it means to be human in this digital world. We have talked about how we are constantly poked and prodded, and information is just thrown upon us whether we are ready to receive it or not, and how we are always on. uh, Priya talked to us about the importance of silence and what the powers of it. And I think one of the things, Priya, you just said, we're always so busy showing up for others. How are we showing up for ourselves? That was just beautiful. We're focusing on how has technology influenced or shaped and reshaped our relationship with our own selves, and what are we doing about it? And so, what are some of the implications? And we touched upon some of those things. And in the rest of the conversation, we are also going to share some solutions, and that's from our individual perspectives of what are some ways in which we can continue to stay human, and what does that look like. um, and as I shared that, Priya, something that came up for me is, we have touched upon that in our conversation just now, but what are the implications of our, what I like to call, tech driven behaviors? Because we are so used to engaging with technology, um, all the chat bots and the bots and whatnot. We engage with devices that, a lot of that is kind of leaking into our in human to human interaction as well. So, what are some of the implications? We talked about, um, the amount of stuff from the outside that we ingest, and we talked about that. But I know that we had wanted to talk about a few things such as focus, motivation, our decision making abilities, and how we view rest and recharge, right? uh, so what are your thoughts on that?
My favorite there is rest and recharge. Right? And for me, no better way than finding that reflective space, and making me my best friend for now.
Mm,
Yeah.
that is so
So
beautiful.
it's important because, and a small thing like, it's easy for us to WhatsApp, send messages, which is all really beautiful. But I'm asking myself, can I also just sometimes pick up the phone and just talk instead of sending messages? It really took away my ability to focus on a single task. You know, the attention span I felt had significantly reduced. And ever since we've had this conversation and run up to this, right, I'm just being very conscious. And when I do that, I said, okay, the easiest thing for me to do is to keep my phone and my whatever stuff far away. So it's an effort for me to go and get it.
Yep. Yep.
So then I might as well just sit. And that's the beginning of the journey, right? Just that pause is the beginning of the journey. And I find that if I'm able to find ways in which I can use, and I'm saying tactile, I think that has a very big part to play because it activates different parts of our brain. And that's important, I think, for increasing focus because that's the one that got hit the most for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it spilt into my rest and recharge time
Hmm. Hmm.
because I think I'm resting, but I'm really not resting because I'm busy watching something. I'm not saying any of it is bad.
Yeah.
This is not either or situation.
Hmm.
It's really a situation where I can continue to be human despite the deluge that's coming my way. Again, it just boils down to being intentional. And
Yes.
can
Yeah.
I, how does this look like for me? Can I be more self aware
Hmm.
when I'm doing what I'm doing? Can I just be a little more self aware?
Hmm. Hmm.
I think that for me is the first step.
Hmm. Yeah. And in reflection of that, there's some comments here. Interesting flow of conversation, nice to follow, showing up for others, right? And thanks to the digital tool which is providing the opportunity. Yes,
That's true.
that's true. Thank you. Um, you know, when you said being self aware, that again goes back to how connected are we with ourselves and how much time do we give ourselves? And or are we running on autopilot all the time? For me, a physical thing that's helped me to do to sort of shake myself out of that is really focusing on my breathing,
Ah, okay.
and actually just taking a minute and becoming aware of my breathing. Because a few years ago I realized that I sometimes forget to breathe, and it used to happen more when I was working full time, and there was always, I was running from one to the next thing, so I wasn't even aware of what my body was doing. And I realized that I don't really breathe well. Uh, so bringing my focus back to breathing is a very tangible way for me to sort of break out of whatever it is I am in and come back to being in touch with myself.
It's a very connection to your body, right?
Yes, yes.
And
And then,
and it's easy. I mean, it's easier when we can connect to our gross self than go to and then move to the subtler states of
yes,
the body.
yes, absolutely. So I use that as my like first step, if you will, in that. And I realized that the more space we give to technology, because it's going to take as much as we give. That's something I've experienced. The more space we give to technology, the more we slip into doing, and the farther away we get from being.
Ah, beautiful.
That's what came up for me as I was sharing that.
So it's more about us staying connected to the moment, our being. Um, yeah. So this is interesting. Meenakshi, I think we've sort of there's lots more to explore, I'm sure, on
Absolutely.
this. And if anyone out there is listening to the recording, do you have any comments? Please do add, ask. We can continue the conversation on being human in a digital world, personal space, personal relationship to yourself. I'm just setting it up for also our next session, which is going to be about how do we continue to be human and bring forth our humanness in our workspaces
Yes. Yes.
and our work relationships. That's really taken a huge, what shall I say, churn since the pandemic. And sort of that space that we had was beautifully filled by technology, but it's again being mindful. So let's explore that in our next session. And before we close, Meenakshi, would love to hear from you as to what are one or two things that you are walking away with as we explode today.
I was going to ask you that. Oh my God. So for me, I think a couple of things you said, learning to be our own best friends. And there was something else you said. We're so busy for showing up for others, and how do we show up for ourselves? I think that's a question that I'm definitely going to think more about. And the making ourselves our best friend. I think there's so much. So I believe that everything is cyclical. So everything that we think that, oh, it's the future of this and the future of that, I believe that it's already happened, and it's just uh, we are moving through it. So everything that we think is the future, it's already happened. Like if you look back at the ancient seven wonders of the world, like how do you even imagine those things were built, right? With none of the technology as we know it today existed, when none of that existed. So for me, it's really about everything being cyclical. And so uh, getting in touch with our own selves, and the way you put it, Priya, that's so valuable to me, because I think that with all this influx of technology, we have come so far away from our ancient wisdom, and we feel so disconnected with our roots. And I hope that we can talk about this when we talk about in our third session, when we talk about ecosystems. That really coming back to who we are, at the essence of who we are, and not forgetting that despite everything that's happening around us. I think that's very important. So I'm walking away with some of those thoughts. The second thing for me is that I'm also feeling a little bit more hopeful, given how we talked about the need for balance. So we're not saying we are accepting that the digital world is the reality that's here to stay, and we're not fighting that, but we're saying, hey, how do we find the balance and still retain that sense of humanness? So just I am feeling more hopeful than I was when we had first talked about this a few
Right.
weeks ago. So
Right.
yeah, that's it for me. How about you?
Um, for me, I think what you said, right? Technology takes up as much space as we give it.
Mm,
So we are really in charge. We shouldn't forget
mm,
that.
mm,
So let's not give our power away to something outside of ourselves. I think that's technology has come in to support us, and it still plays a supporting role. And I think that's something that I'd like to keep reminding myself. I mean, it's just phenomenal what it can do.
mm,
It's made my life so much easier. It's just really wonderful. But can we still find, so for me that balance is what is the second thing that I'm taking away
mm,
from the
mm,
conversation today.
mm.
And yeah, and I think finding those moments where you can connect with yourself is becoming more and more important for me.
Mm, mm.
I don't think I want to lose sight. I don't want to lose sight of that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's such a perfect segue to what we want to talk about next week on August 1st in episode 2, around our relations, our interpersonal relationships, and
Yeah.
focusing on work in the work environment, because leaders at all levels, professionals at all levels, that's a challenge to stay connected with oneself and still show up as a human, with all the aspects that we look out for, particularly from a leadership point of view. The authenticity, the empathy, the um,
Compassion.
compassion, yes, and being people centered, but still ensuring that business goals are met. It's a lot that happens in that space, and we are using more and more technology to stay connected, to get work done. So our ways of working have evolved. So I think this will be a perfect segue for that, and I think we've set ourselves up nicely to continue the conversation on that front.
Yes. So for all who are present today and who, if you're here, do try and join us next week as well. And would love to see you there with more thoughts, more reflections, for more explorations.
Absolutely, absolutely. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us live and or catching us on the replay. We'll be back here next week, August 1st, same time, 7 p.m. India time, 9:30 a.m. New York time, and we're going to go into episode 2 of being human in a digital world. I have to get that right. Being human in a digital world, and we're going to be looking at our behaviors and actions in our interpersonal spaces focused on our work environments. So, again, like today, we'll be live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. You can catch us on any of those platforms. Bring us your thoughts and your questions and your reflections, and we look forward to seeing you then again. Thank you very much. Take care and be well. Bye for now.
Bye for now.